The Nintendo Switch is currently one of Nintendo's most popular video game consoles in its history, having sold as of June 2025 152.1 million units. By the end of its production cycle. It will overtake the Nintendo DS as the most sold console in their catalog, and quite possibly the most popular video game console in history, beating out the PS2. However, with the Nintendo Switch being released over 8 years ago, it was finally time to introduce the successor, which Nintendo did at the beginning of this year. The Nintendo Switch 2 made its presence known to the world with its countless new features it brings to the table. While all of that is exciting, what people care for the most is the games, and we saw our first glimpse of a new Mario Kart in this reveal trailer, later to be known as Mario Kart World. Later in April, we received the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, revealing countless new games coming to the console, including a new open world 3D Donkey Kong game. And now with the Nintendo Switch 2 gearing up for release, I want to talk about some of the future games I wish to see on this new platform, and in general, new practices I think Nintendo should take on with the release of this new console. One thing I really hope Nintendo does with the Switch 2 is to actually differentiate it from the original. Have people want a Switch 2, because if they are unable to do that, we may have another Wii to Wii U situation. The Nintendo Switch was so successful because of how different it was to the rest of the market. A handheld console capable of producing home console type games was innovative and something that made people outside of Nintendo fans want a Nintendo Switch. Plus, with the expansive games being pumped out in its first year of the console's life, made people really want a Switch just for games like Breath of the Wild or Super Mario Odyssey. We can already see Nintendo trying to persuade people to buy a Switch 2 for games such as Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza. However, besides the games, the Nintendo Switch 2 is just an upgraded Nintendo Switch with more powerful graphics and functions, which realistically was what most people wanted, but will make it difficult to convince the more casual video game players to buy a Nintendo Switch 2, especially in its first year. Let's hope Nintendo has learned its lesson from the Switch and act quickly when issues arise. One of the biggest issues that arose during the Nintendo Switch's lifespan was the issue of Joy-Con drift, and Nintendo tried to act nothing was wrong until they really couldn't avoid the issue anymore. Eventually, Nintendo did start to offer free repairs to users who dealt with this issue, but it felt that they did that out of obligation due to the amount of users reporting the issue rather than trying to offer a generous helping hand. For the Switch 2, if any issues arise regarding the console, whether it be hardware or software issues, I really hope Nintendo can act quickly, and if they can't address the issue right away, at least provide communication so it's clear that they are aware of the issue instead of outright ignoring the countless reports of an issue. It will really save them a headache in the long run and help with the perception among fans. With the amount of games that were released on the Nintendo Switch, it's really obvious to see what game franchise still hasn't had a new game being released. For the Switch 2, I really hope Nintendo tries to revive other franchises like Star Fox or F-Zero and bring them into the modern age. These games still have countless unexplored potential and can breathe new life to these games, just like how previous dormant series were given a new life on Nintendo Switch. Especially since these games still have countless fans, and with a release of a new game in these series, it can lead to new fans appreciating the material which they may have otherwise been unaware of. This may be a bit controversial, but I really hope this console has a shorter lifespan compared to the Nintendo Switch. Before the Switch, no Nintendo console had a lifespan greater than 6 years, but with the Switch, it lasted 8 years before the launch of the Switch 2. In my opinion, especially for the hardware included on the Switch, that was a tad bit too long, and it really showed in the last couple of years of the Switch of how old the hardware was getting compared to the software being released. I hope for the Switch 2, the console lifespan lasts for about 4 to 6 years, because as it stands with a minimum of 4 years on the Nintendo Switch 2, we will have dealt with the Nintendo Switch for 12 years, which is honestly crazy to me. Over a decade with the same concept in mind may get a bit stale for many and can cause future problems that will need a major overhaul to overcome. With a shorter lifespan, it can also give Nintendo time to come with a greater generational leap in hardware that is more in line with the current console releases and help keep Nintendo supporters excited waiting for the next release, instead of them asking, is it out yet? Or when will the next console release? Or what the f have I been doing for these past 8 years? With the games, I really hope the Switch 2 takes a similar approach of the original Switch, which is a mix of genres that anyone can enjoy. It really sucks that some first-party Nintendo Switch games have to be upgraded with a purchase in order to be playable on Switch 2, which really makes it harder to justify upgrading for some. But with new original releases, that can change the narrative. I just hope Nintendo can focus on new original games instead of porting over previous games, which feels like a good chunk of the Nintendo Switch library. Granted, these games are still very high quality releases, but I think to truly stand on its own, the Switch 2 needs to have original releases that will make people want a Switch 2, especially with mainline first-party games, and we can already start to see that play out, and I hope Nintendo can continue on this path for a strong first year of the Nintendo Switch 2. I'm very excited for the Nintendo Switch 2, clearly. Nintendo's in a much better position for the release compared to the release of the first Switch. Nintendo was practically pulling their all for the successful launch of the Switch 1, which really paid off big time in the long run. And I'm sure that the Switch 2 will be successful. However, I don't think it will reach the heights of the Switch 1. That being said, I hope Nintendo doesn't become complacent with their success and just continue to push forward with new innovative game releases that will make the Nintendo Switch 2 be a true successor to the Nintendo Switch 1.